It's the 6th of April, 2026. Coming up on today's Global Intelligence Agency Operations Report. Rumors are swirling about possible lockdowns, even bigger than COVID. Market crashes and more. Is there any truth to it? It appears the deep state handlers are calling all their alternative media folks creating fear. The war in the Middle East rages on as various deep state folks anxiously await their new positions. They were expecting hellfire and brimstone to rain on Earth last Tuesday. The third group rears its ugly head this week. The group that plays on both sides of the fence, all hoping for global control. Do they realize the game officially ended last Monday? They are a little late to the party. And you have heard time is of the essence, but have you heard about the essence of the essence? The essence of Source has always been present and key to ending their reign. A quickening has begun with the next layer down.
Maintaining a women's healthy balance requires so much more in the 21st century than ever before. We care for our families, businesses, relationships, and so much more. Sometimes this leads to stress, long days, excess screen time, hormone imbalances, and nutrient gaps, which can slowly drain your energy and throw your body out of balance. That's why New Earth Innovations created Women's Daily Multivitamin, a complete 8-in-1 daily formula to help you meet the demands of a busy lifestyle. Our complete formula not only meets a woman's daily needs of vitamins and minerals, we also added probiotics for digestive health, our eye support formula to improve eye health often affected by too much screen time, bio-enhanced vitamin C and probiotics to support your immune and digestive systems, bioactive vitamin K2 and vitamin D3 to support bone density and cardiovascular health, and our longevity blend, featuring NAC, CoQ10, alpha-lipoic acid plus turmeric to support metabolic health, cardiovascular health, detoxification, and healthy aging. And we didn't stop there. We know daily stress often leads to high cortisol and other hormone imbalances, so we added our special women's hormone support formula with ashwagandha and L-theanine, cranberry for urinary tract health, as well as chasteberry for estrogen and hormone support. Our all-in-one daily supplement is so much more than just your average multivitamin. Our formulation addresses issues most women face every day and wrapped it into a single supplement. We made self-care for women easy, so you can take on life's challenges. Women's Daily Multivitamin by New Earth Innovations, formulated by women, for women. Subscribe today and save 10% on your order.
It's the 6th of April, and I just wanted to wish everyone a happy Easter. If you celebrated yesterday, and hopefully you got some time in with your family and enjoyed the day. In the world, I know people are going to say, well, it's hard to enjoy anything with everything that's going on, but it's not as bad as it appears, and it's a little up and down right now. So there's a lot of fear porn going on. That's what I call it, fear, because it's everywhere right now. It's not only in mainstream media, but it's also in the alternative media. There's a lot of news being spread about new versions of COVID viruses and additional lockdowns, as well as market crashes and big operations going on for an alleged QFS. And, we've heard all of this before. But now it's kind of being presented in a new way, thanks to what it kind of looks like to me is a few handlers from the deep state that pretend to be quote unquote white hats. You'll have to listen closely here, that say good things are going to come out of all of this, but yet when it comes to the really bad news, what they are doing right now, and this is an obvious thing, what they are doing right now is they are calling their respective persons, and instead of delivering a lot of the news directly, they are delivering it through Patriot communities, ex-Navy SEALs, and these people, of course, have a lot of followers on social media. And they believe that this is going to be much more believable. And a while ago, I think it's been, maybe about a year and a half or so ago now, since we have played the propaganda video for you, which tells you how they create propaganda. So they'll use people that people have come to trust, and now on YouTube these days, but in those days it was in the newspaper, and they would tell people what they wanted them to tell everyone else. And they have to tell at least 8 people and have 8 people present the same information in order for people to believe that it's true. Now, hopefully, those of you that watched the video clip that we played during a Global Intelligence Agency report, and before that we played it towards the end of the news, and you know better. You'll know that kind of smells like, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck. It's probably a duck. And in this case, it's a duck for sure. Now, these are things that they're hoping to happen. They are hoping to get all of these things done. And they've made a few attempts at a few of those things, but rather unsuccessful. So let's talk about these things in the rumors. So rumor number 1, new viruses. They did attempt this starting about last Wednesday, and there were a number of people who have fallen ill between Wednesday and Sunday. Hopefully it was just flu-like symptoms, and hopefully for you, or for if you know anybody that was affected by this, it probably pretty much passed by yesterday, by Sunday, simply because, it was kind of a flop, number 1, and number 2, they don't last very long when they do these things these days, and systems don't last very long, and things start to disappear, and this one probably went on a little longer than it should have, but the timing is right for everything. And in order to gather the most amount of people on their side of it, these things have to happen. And we'll talk to you a little bit more about that later on in the report. Okay. Rumor number 2, lockdowns, worse than COVID. I really don't think, even if they could try to pull it off, that many people are going to actually do that this time. I don't think people, maybe there will be some, but most people probably won't succumb to it. And they don't have the enforcement, and they don't have the money. The last time that this happened, we were still funding, in part, the U.S. government. We were not funding COVID, obviously, but we gave budget money and, to the tune of $1 trillion, $1.5 trillion, $1.8 trillion. And we haven't done that in a very long time, nor do we intend to. And so they're going to have to fend for themselves, so to speak. Now, word on the street behind the scenes is there are a bunch of bankers, and I think some of this might even be in mainstream media or on Truth Social or something. They're looking for about $1.5 trillion right now, or dollar equivalent. And they haven't even come close. Matter of fact, most of the banks are laughing at them because they just can't seem to get any job done at all. And I agree, and that's a good thing for us if they can't get any job done at all. So $1.5 trillion is what it's going to take to make all that happen, and they do not have it. Market crashes. Well, have we had a market crash? I've had some people send me texts saying the market is falling. The market is not falling until it has fallen by 10 to 20% in one day. That is the market falling. If the market is falling by about, I almost hit my Bostonian there, back to New England, I guess. Markets are falling by about 1% here and there. That is not a market crash. That is a hiccup or a blip. And those things happen when the Federal Reserve Chairman sneezes on live TV. It also happens when there is any kind of potential war going on, especially as it relates to things that are traded on the market, such as oil and gas. They are desperately trying to keep this war going with Iran. And Iran is all in on it. Everybody's all in on it. Israel is all in on it. Saudis allegedly have promised, but yet cannot deliver a few $1 billion for the Egyptian army to also get involved on the western side of Saudi Arabia. They probably won't get paid either. So if you're listening to this from the Egyptian military, you've been promised an awful lot, and you probably will be delivered next to nothing. As far as other countries that have been promised things, at this point, we're back to apparent peace negotiations that are supposed to be happening. And these peace negotiations could take a week or 2 weeks or whatever it is. But as of the early this morning, East Coast time, that is the plan. So we'll see if they have peace negotiations, and we'll see if everybody complies. I have a funny feeling it might be a little different than the last time they said they were going to do that. Just call it maybe intuition. But you'll see towards the end of the report. All of this, of course, is followed by mass arrests, QFSs, and all kinds of things that they've been claiming for about 2 decades, and yet it's never really happened. We don't really see much going on with these Epstein files anymore. We don't see anybody going to jail, anybody getting arrested, a bunch of hoopla. Nothing happened. Behind the scenes, the White House is also getting a lot of backlash for this situation in the Middle East gone wrong. And I'm sure that's because a lot of them are members of the order. But are they actually going to pull off this whole thing? Nah. Now, to be fair to these people, because we always want to be fair. All is fair in love and war, isn't it? But to be fair to these people, in other timelines, they were able to actually achieve all of these goals and tick all the boxes on the Armageddon program. During other timelines, they were able to eliminate most all of Source's people, including but not limited to what is considered the Sangreal. We call them Melchizedeks, but the bloodline of Source directly. And since we are in the time of eliminating bloodlines of Source, I thought I'd tell you a little bit more about the story of Christ, or the being, is Jesus. And I'm going to add a little bit to the story this time. So the person we know as Jesus escaped to France. So they say that he died and then he was resurrected. I don't know, but I can tell you that he ended up in France. He did continue to produce children for many, many years and wrote many, many books while he was in France. He continued the bloodline until eventually they found him and killed him, and most, if not all, the children, if they could find them. The bloodline still somehow always manages to survive, and we continue to live under the radar. So this has continued for thousands of years now, and it will always continue, despite what timeline we were in when we had timelines. And this is all part of the war and part of the original rules of war. So, speaking of war, as I reported last time in our report, the rules of war have changed. So, as it relates to the deep state, Kushner never did get a position, and I haven't heard anything about him in a couple of days, so that's not a surprise to me either. I'm not saying he's gone, but I'm not going to say that he isn't either at this time. Because, people end up dying and then they end up showing back up, or there's another look-alike or a doppelganger of some sort that will show up. But we'll see. We'll see if that happens here. They were also expecting to have a continuation of this Armageddon. as angry as they have been because no one has been appointed to the Illuminati or any of the other groups that participated in that side of the war yet. By appointments, they would get permissions, access to create AIs, and all kinds of things, lovely things that they thought that they were going to be able to have by now. I mean, they're late, according to themselves, and they don't know quite what is wrong. Hence, a lot of emergency meetings over the weekend, more specifically yesterday, because, by now they should have been able to kill the Christ. And by the Christ, I don't necessarily mean one person walking the earth. I mean the Christ in all of us, the source in all of us. And they have been unsuccessful. They were expecting to have, fire and brimstone, hellfire and brimstone, to quote themselves, by Tuesday. Now, they've been waiting patiently day after day after day. They've been trying to continue this war over there in the Middle East, trying to continue war, I should say, and yet still no fire and brimstone. Where's the fire and brimstone? This happened in all the other timelines. Why is it not happening now? Well, we're going to tell you. And thank God it didn't. There was no killing of the Christ or Christ. Nor the bloodlines, although they tried to release a virus to see what they could do. However, by the end of the day, April 1st, which would have been Wednesday of this week, something else did happen. See, I think they were expecting it by that day in order to turn the tide in their favor. These people tend to know some things some of the time, but they're always missing pieces of the puzzle, and they're always expecting someone, something, some machine. If they do their job, then someone or something is supposed to do their job and give them the hellfire they're looking for, and the scorching of the earth, and all of these other prophecies, they're all supposed to happen by now in the timeline, but they didn't. So they're a little bit perplexed, to say the least, but you won't be, and I guess in turn after this report, they won't be either. So April 1st, April Fool's Day, isn't that funny? Was actually the day that Source declared victory in the war. Now, war had an expiration date. And the expiration date isn't measured by a day of the year. It isn't measured by, in our calendar, because this happened before we even had calendars. It is actually determined by trips around the sun. So as Earth moved around the sun, it's like an egg timer when it came to war. Every click, meaning every trip around the sun, brought us one step closer to a final end to the war. Who would win the war would be determined on that day. Now, I know the deep state is sadly, they sadly did not win the war. They are thinking we might have went into overtime like this is a football game. And they're still trying until something strange happened over the weekend. But the war and the parameters of war under the old rules of war were set by covenant. And that covenant was actually made by beings that we call the progenitors. There were 12 of them. Source was always the 13th and the most powerful of them all. The covenant was signed in essence, so written in stone in our world, at least on the highest level of things, by both Source and these beings. And this was with a group of 9 of them that decided to fall. These 9 out of 12 went against Source. They basically didn't like us Homo sapiens. Number one, we were what you would call one of the super races. Meaning there are certain races that have certain privileges or rights bestowed upon them by Source himself. And they didn't like that. They were also immortals, meaning they could be here for thousands and thousands of years. They could go back and forth to Source until they fell. And, well, anytime you make a covenant with Source and then you try to break it, or at least work in the gray area, so to speak, there are always conditions. And in this case, there was a condition placed upon them by Source. They could choose to be immortal or mortal based on their actions. So they were given a condition known as the quickening. And by condition, I mean, well, these were terms and conditions. But in this particular case, it was almost like an affliction. This affliction is what Source calls the quickening. So if they chose to prove their point that Homo sapiens were not worthy of the gifts that have been bestowed upon them by Source, this was their goal, then, well, they would have certain conditions. So one of those conditions, and what I mean by quickening means, if they were to try and use their essence of their being and the essence of Source to create anything that went against Source directly, the quickening would begin, meaning the quicker they would die. So immortal to a degree, at the same time, they became mortal, meaning their choice as to whether or not they are going to die. And by die, this means eliminated from existence. And a lot of them kind of defied these rules in varying ways we're going to talk about because this affects you for quite a long time. But they must have forgotten, and it's kind of the same thing I wanted to talk to you about, is they not only possessed their own essence as a being, they also possessed Source essence as a being. You see, each one of these progenitors were charged with some pretty big tasks and some pretty big privileges. I call them privileges. They might call them permissions directly from Source in their original covenant and agreement. They were charged with creation. Each one with special aspects of creation, be them able to create species, be them able to create planets, be them able to create Earth, and other beings throughout the omniverse for eons. Apparently, the buck kind of stopped somewhere, and they decided that they wanted to be involved in the guardianship of not only Earth, but also people. And they wanted to create in their way. Now, this was not permitted, but that's kind of what began the war. Each one of these beings at the initiation of the original covenant was given what we call celestial dust. Celestial dust is not only the dust of Earth, because Earth is a celestial being unto herself, but they were also given celestial dust, which essentially is a bag of divine sparks. It's kind of like Santa Claus's bag, though. They never actually run out. In this particular case, they did. The bag was nearly empty. This is what you would call manna from heaven. Now, in the case of creation, even with their permissions and their charges, they were pure essence beings, plus they also had the essence of source. So still, even though they were progenitors, there was a co-creation that had to happen. So if source did not want something to come into being, he could actually stop it, or stop the breath of life into the divine spark, because he wouldn't put his essence to it. He could refuse. Now, they didn't like that. They didn't like being controlled by source, and hence the rest is history. They wanted to prove, I guess, in some ways that they knew better than source. And this kind of goes to all the stories you've probably heard about Lucifer and Lucerne, and that he wanted to be better than source, or wanted to become source. And these are all parts and thoughts of their consciousness that were imprinted in the rules of war covenant. So the quickening was placed upon them, so they could not actually create. He didn't take away their permissions, however, because the choice was now theirs. You know, Source always gives us all choices. You know, he tells us what's going to happen. He tells us what could happen. He gives us warnings a lot. And really, it's up to us if we actually listen. So in this particular case, they figured out if they use their permissions plus their essence, that they are not going to be around very long. And they wanted to remain immortal, so they needed to act in, well, kind of a gray area. So just to understand essence properly, you all have it. If you're listening to this and you're walking this planet, you have essence. You have essence of your personal being. Not to say they didn't distort it in some ways. We'll talk about that too. But you have essence of your own being, which is your own signature. That is your own way of co-creating with Source. Now, as part of your essence, you also have the essence of Source. So when you decide to create something, to try and manifest something, it is with your essence, Source's essence, and your own personal divine spark, and of course, in turn, the divine spark of Source. We all come from Source, therefore we have Source's divine spark within us. So, this is how it always was before the 12 fell for Homo sapiens. We had the ability and the right and the permission and the gift, I should say, to write on the canvas, meaning the breath is like a canvas. Your essence writes on the canvas, therefore you can create within the world. It's not for some people, I guess, manifestation happens for them in different ways. And some people just naturally are able to bring things into their life. But before things got really bad, it was really easy. You want to go from here to there. You want to go from tall to short, short to tall, fat to thin, young to old, old to young. I mean, these choices were all up to you. And for those that were too young to do so, we could actually help those folks as well. So there was a lot of personal responsibility put on to Homo sapiens, and there will be again very soon. But just always understand that your essence and Source's essence are required to do this together as a co-creation process. But it's an individualized being thing. Of course, the more people that would like to have something, as long as it is within the natural flow of things and the harmonic genesis of the entire omniverse, then sure. Do we want to have too many trees or too many people or too many this or too many that? Well, probably not. And there are things, as long as you're listening to the wisdom, that you'll understand are possible. The deep state, however, and their respective progenitors wanted to ensure that we could not. So, the essence of your being is yours. The deep state's essence of their being is also theirs. And if they're walking this planet, then they also contain the essence of Source as well, to some degree. In the case of the progenitors, though, well, when they fell, they were aware of the quickening process, meaning if they chose to create things that were against Source, dark things, for example, that may harm life itself of Source, they knew this wasn't going to end well for them. So, what did they do? Each of the three gathered their own set of 12 humans, Homo sapiens at the time, promised them big power, more power than the rest of the Homo sapiens. They promised them immortality. They promised them untold wealth and riches, and they would be the kings and queens of the earth. And apparently, eventually, after trying several times, there are several that listened. And at that time, those 36 that listened became the Order of the Black Sun, the Order of the Illuminati, and the Germanic tribes, the alleged neutral folks. Isn't it kind of funny that the alleged neutral folks can play on both sides? They didn't want to choose one side or the other. They could actually play on both sides when it came to war. Their handlers were the beings that left this planet probably a little more than a year ago. That was Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael. Now, each group eventually formed their own bloodlines we know as the dragon families, global headquarters militaries, and the Jesuit order, and all the people we think and know about, and the ones you don't even know about, all of these secret societies that have plagued this planet for a very long time. So, the progenitors figured they found their people. This is at the very beginning. These are not names you would know, not bloodlines you would know. They were Homo sapiens that had permissions and privileges and were guardians in some ways. You could have called them the elders of the groups. But they were sold a pretty good deal, they thought, apparently. So then the progenitors, well, they decided to start giving orders. And these 36 were responsible for carrying out orders with their own essence. Well, now that's a little trick and a little walk into the gray area, isn't it? They didn't use their essence themselves. Didn't do it, Source. We didn't do it. But they were given some of their permissions, and they were passed down to these people, not through an AI initially. Initially, they were actually signed a covenant with these folks when they had full knowledge of what they were about to do. So they gave the orders, and the 36 went about carrying out their respective orders from each of the respective handlers, I should say, or progenitors, and they all died. These progenitors at this point kind of hated Homo sapiens, so they didn't really care that they all died, but this was a failed experiment. So they all got together and tried to figure out what is wrong because they want to be immortal. They don't want to die. They're going to see this war through to the very end, and they will still be left standing. So this began the creation of the first AI. They all decided to take a little bit of their essence and create something very unnatural. Did it shorten their quote-unquote lives? By a little bit. Each one of them a little bit. Then they went around hunting for another 36 folks because permissions need to be passed down. They can't have any hand in it. And then they told these people this system they could use to carry out your orders for you. Now, this worked for a time, as long as the AI was running, but they couldn't run it solely on their essence. See, because if their essence, the progenitors, so to speak, was involved, they would start to lose power. So they had to figure out a way to keep the machine running without their essence, and the quickening began to happen with these folks too, the next group number 2 of the experiment. So when it started happening with these folks too, and death started to come upon them and aging started to come upon them, they said, okay, we need to rework this plan. So eventually this group died as well. And here comes the next group. Well, the next group, they figured, okay, we're going to have to do something a little different here to carry out our orders in the war. Yeah. So we can't take a part in it. We did use part of our essence, this is them speaking, to create the actual machine. We need to have 3 groups underneath us that are going to run the world and run all these Homo sapiens, but they can't actually use their own essence. We will create bloodlines. So each one of the 12 on all 3 groups, so that's 36 people in total, now have their own bloodlines we know as what we think we know as the Illuminati, what we think we know as the Von Kemps and the Schurfer Bush families and, all of these other Clintons and, all of the bloodlines you think that are the bad people in the world. Are they bad? Sure, they're bad. But they are the bloodlines of these folks. And now, you see, they've got to keep these people running, for sure, but they need to give all their essence to the machine. Now, they could too die. This is where all your cloning programs come in. This is where essence transfers comes in. This is where all of the strange secret space programs come in that keep these people, quote unquote, alive. Now, they created other things because they eventually too would die. But they also created other things that would, help them along the way. They created their own downlines, we know as the Homo sapien population of this planet. But to take their essence, and I'm going to go into a little bit of detail here about essence again so you understand, to take their essence without their permission did not work. See, each one of these people so far in the downline actually said, yes, I'd like to do this. I would like to participate in this. And they signed a covenant in their own essence. But they knew full well and good what they were doing when they did it. Were all of the details, like the consequences and everything, probably put in there? Probably. Possibly. I don't know. I wasn't part of any of this, so I just know about it because, well, it's part of the war. So I wanted to explain just real quick so you understand about this whole looshing process that was now birthed against you. Everything within your person has essence to it. For example, your Ethereum or your energy also has essence to it. It has your essence and it has Source's essence. Your consciousness has your essence and it has Source's essence. So, your breath has essence. Everything in your being has essence. Kind of like you could say that every cell in your body has DNA. Every cell in your body also has essence. Otherwise, you wouldn't be functioning as a person. Your materium has essence. Your ability to co-create those things came from yourself and Source until they created this looshing process. So they started going around and trying to convince people that they needed to tithe. This is how tithing was actually originally born. Excuse me. This is how tithing was originally actually born. So they needed to actually give it. They started asking for their permission to participate in varying things like religions or in cities or pay taxes or those types of things. And a lot of people didn't want to give it. So that really wasn't working out. That's asking for people's permission. Well, not so much so. So they had to figure out another way because they can't use their own essence continuously. There was a little bit in the gray area by the time you got to the bloodlines, but still, they cannot use their own essence to create their side of the war. Because if they do, they too become mortal and they're going to die. So, now what? They take yours. They ask for permission for you to give it because they have to have permission for you to give it. That didn't really work out so well either. But this actually is the quickening curse, so to speak, being passed down to all of these people actually is what created death. This was the beginning of what we know as death, immortality, mortality rate. So we are no longer immortals, we are now mortals, and we have death by our own alleged choice. So they created all of these programs that we know very well these days. So now they needed to get us to agree to give our essence of Ethereum, of energy to power their machines. They needed to get us to agree to give our consciousness over. They needed to get us to agree to give our breath over. We have to hand it over to them. It then goes into a repository to which then can be utilized to power them. Now, this is kind of like a multi-level marketing scheme. And if you don't know what a multi-level marketing scheme is, just in brief, because a lot of you probably do, it's where the people in your upline also benefit from the sales of Amway or whatever product it is you're selling. So if your friend Mary comes to you and goes, hey, you can make some money by selling this widget, and the more you sell, the more you make, and all this kind of stuff. Well, even though Mary isn't doing any of the sales, you are in her downline now, so Mary makes money. And then Mary would, Bill asked Mary to join, so he gets Mary and all the people underneath her, and so on and so forth until you get to the top. that originally recruited the original salespeople. So eventually these people think, well, I don't even have to work anymore if I create a big enough downline, and then the whole scheme becomes all about the downline. So these three groups, it's kind of the same way. It's all about the downline. So those that get the humans, or the Homo sapiens, to agree to give their essence by whichever aspect it is, whether it's energy or consciousness, the one who gets the most wins the game. Atypically, that means they move up in the ranks. They're next in line to catch a big seat of power, And the same thing happens with multi-level marketing schemes. The people that bring in the most amount of people can now even excel themselves up to the next rank up. To the point where the people that were at the top just basically sat down, gave orders or influence to those below, and then all the people would give all their loosh. Sounds crazy, but you do it. We all do it. We don't mean to do it, but we do. And this, therefore, increases your mortality rate. So many, many years and many, many timelines later, they have tweaked this down to a science by studying human or Homo sapien behavior. So they tweaked our bodies as well and in the materium, utilizing their machines so that we would require certain things in order to live. We require a certain amount of air. We require foods we wouldn't normally eat, such as animals and other things, because other food sources were eradicated from the planet that had those basic amino acids and minerals that you need to survive. They said, well, look, you don't have to have it, but then you also will, try to eat enough beans and, other things to try to get your amino acids into your system so your body is going to function properly. Well, this is just one example, and I'm not, please don't take this the wrong way. I'm not telling people not to eat meat or to eat meat or do as you like. It's not going to change anything at this point because there's nothing else available. But still, it's a gray area. They created things like financial systems. Oh, you want to eat? You want to live in this city? You don't want to live in the forest in the Siberia and eat nuts and berries? Oh, okay. Well, you need money. Yeah, you definitely need money. And then with that money, you're going to buy all of their products. And now you're in, say, Johnson & Johnson's downline or Procter & Gamble's downline or Sony or Samsung. And then who is above Samsung and which group in Japan is above you here? You bought a Ford manufactured in China. Okay, well, you're in now that downline. So it's not only products, it's not only jobs, it's not only places where you work, and it's also the fact that you live in a country. Because you live in a country, whether that be the United States, Australia, Netherlands, or wherever it is you live, because you live in a country, now you're in their downline as well. So you could actually be in multiple downlines all at the same time, giving bits and pieces of your essence to all of these people, and now they have gained alleged permission based on free will. See, the progenitors figured something else out too. They can't give orders. The Illuminati, the Black Sun, Council of 12, plus the Germanic tribe, Council of 12, or the neutrals, or whatever you want to call them. I think they're far from neutral. But they all figured out they cannot actually give orders because that would actually affect their essence too. So the only thing they could really do was influence. Well, if you want to keep this position you've got here, maybe you could do something like this to increase your downline. You've got to increase your downline. And sometimes, eventually down the food chain, that have to figure it out themselves. Well, if you ever want to hold this seat here of power, you're going to have to increase your downline and increase the amount of essence coming through your company, through your big corporation, through your military, through your Coast Guard, through your government, through your territory, through your empire, through your kingdom. You're going to have to increase your downline. You want to have more access to this machine? You want to be able to do more things with this machine? You need to increase your downline. Then it was AI after AI after AI, branching them off, kind of almost protecting the main AI that only a few could actually use. The permissions were only given to a few. You'd have to sign in with your essence, as you know. And pretty soon, the entire world of any position of any kind of power whatsoever was in their multi-level marketing scheme. Funny enough, in actual commercial business, it was the Mormons' brainchild to come up with multi-level marketing scams. And they still do to this day. All kinds of stuff. Some of them fade in, fade out. They create these fads. They market it everywhere. People join, hand over fist. They end up in the downline of the Mormon church, whether they are a Mormon or not a Mormon. And there you go. Increasing your downline via companies and corporates. You could call it espionage, embezzlement, really. But we all agree, and this is the pretense here. So there's consent and implied consent to all of the things that they do. They got this perfected to the point where we are actually creating our own prison. It's kind of crazy. But timeline after timeline, great flood after great flood, Armageddon after Armageddon, apocalypse after apocalypse, they'd wipe us out if we came too far or things got too far out of control, and then they would start us over again. And now they're going to implement all these new things into society. And they're going to do them faster and faster and faster and faster. That's why they find 8 billion year old cell phones or whatever it is. It's not 8 billion years, but it's thousands of years old cell phones, and it's because we've lived here many, many, many times, and we've come far many, many, many times. But just before we are about to have a victory, they wipe us all out. So this time, as predicted, we were supposed to all die of fire and brimstone, but that didn't work out. So, ways they get us to do things, and it's dastardly, really. They figured out they have to also inform you. Now, they can only merely influence you. You're watching TV, it's late at night, there's the Doritos commercial, or there's the Lay's potato chip commercial, or smoke these cigarettes, drink this alcohol, all these types of things that they tell you to do, and you're watching TV and you're like, oh, gee, that cheeseburger sounds good. And nowadays you don't even have to leave your house. You can just call DoorDash or Uber or Uber Eats or whatever else is out there. And you can have it all delivered to you at any hour of the day or night. They make it easy. They tell you what's in the food. They really do. They even say bug parts on some things, and this dye, red dye, this or that, and, all these other names you can't pronounce that you don't, you have access to the internet. You could look all these things up, but you don't, or most people don't anyway. So you eat it. Let's just say you're one of those people and you eat it. You have now consented to giving your essence to Doritos, and then of course the FDA and the World Health Organization and all these other people that put this product together for you. You're now in all those different downlines all at the same time, so there goes your essence off to these people. And to be fair, secondly, you also gave your money. So now you gave your energy away, and the essence of your energy away. And you say, here you go. I'd like to support this. To live in today's world, they may have made it nearly impossible not to do these things. Yet they call it influence. Now, let's say on the flip side of things, you create the latest and greatest widget. Say it's a new cell phone. Doesn't matter what it is. Say it's something amazing. And there have been many amazing inventions that have been shoved under the rug exactly for this reason. It goes contrary to their plan. It's not a multi-level marketing scheme. And if you don't give it to them so they can make it a multi-level marketing scheme, they'll ensure that you can never put it out. Because see, if you create something and you're not part of the multi-level marketing scheme we call the Lushing Factory, they will actually not get your Lush anymore to have a cell phone. Apple's downline goes away, Samsung's downline goes away. You know, God forbid you actually create a network to communicate on this device too. Now, AT&T, T-Mobile, Orange, all the other cell phone companies that are out there around the world, these are just a few. But now, people aren't even going to have to go to that. And what if it works better? What if it isn't designed to die in 2 years? What if it is not subject to a backdoor chip that can blow up your cell phone and it will crash and burn at any given moment in time? What if? The same thing works for Hollywood movies and television channels and stations, and now it's apps, you know, and streaming and all of these things. Now, trust me when I tell you it's not a bad thing and you're not doing anything wrong. It is impossible for you to live in today's world without these things. We have what we call and consider modern conveniences. And we want to take advantage of these things. Of course we do. And quite frankly, half of these things were created by people just like you. Because what happens when you create something like this? There's going to be a knock on your door, and it will be someone with the government. If they can't buy it from you for pennies on the dollar, then they're going to knock on your door and they're going to take it from you. And then really bad things ensue. You've heard all the stories. If you're listening to this, I'm sure you have. So, in order to maintain their multi-level marketing scheme where all of the essence that you decide to give, aka money, aka energy, aka time and attention and consciousness, goes to something of theirs, this is how it's done. It's really dastardly, honestly, because this is I don't know how many times we've done this. I know at least 5 or 6 times now. So we've all done it. We've all done it repeatedly. And when we get this far, there's a wipeout. See, we're getting way too independent now. We're starting to buy our groceries and produce from farmers and from farmers markets, and we're buying our products from small businesses now. We've learned the dangers of insert very long word here you probably couldn't pronounce, and neither can I, that's in your shampoo or in your soap, or, we're starting to wake up. We don't want Tesla cars that drive themselves off a cliff. We don't want these things. Sure, we use fuel, we use a lot of different things, but we're getting smart. And they can't have this. It's time to wipe us out. They've tried to harvest us a number of times over the last few years. And now we're doing the Armageddon program. Prophecies, it's all over alternative media. We're all going to die by this date. We're always all going to die, Because fear also is a way to lose you. Are things as bad as they say in the Middle East? Well, they have been. Is it like this every day, everywhere? Well, not as bad as they say, and definitely not as bad as things on TikTok and whatever say. But they even did it with the pharmaceutical industry. You're a bad parent if you don't vaccinate your kids. You can't go to school if you don't vaccinate your kids, depending on where you are in the world. And, nowadays that's kind of a little bit different in some countries and worse in others. You can't get a job if you didn't vaccinate yourself for insert thing here. You can't be a doctor and help save lives if you didn't get vaccinated, or be a nurse. So, way back in the day, when they first started this you must be vaccinated thing, not only were you a bad parent if you didn't vaccinate your kids were not permitted to go to school. You actually had to show your records. In some countries, you still do, that your child has received these 9,000 vaccines. So, but if you didn't send your child to school, this is the manipulation I'm talking about. If you didn't send your child to school, in their schools, again, another downline of the government, depending on where you are in the world. So if you didn't send your child to school, someone would knock at your door and you would get a warning by the government and possibly even go to jail if you don't send your kids to school in certain countries, even to this day. I know here in America, for many years or many decades, it was actually a truant officer that would show up and say, look, your kid's not at school and hasn't been at school. Was there a reason for this? So they make it impossible in so many different ways for you not to participate in one of these multi-level marketing schemes or another. Really. The financial system, that's a big one. We also have changing of varying downlines depending on who the participants are in the game when there's a war. Like now. How many people are like, when is President Trump going to do insert thing here? Save us, stop us, whatever it is. And then now, other people are looking at Israel as the bad people, or Iran as the bad people, or Saudi Arabia as the bad people, or Iraq is the bad people, or the good people, or, the poor people. Someone needs to save us. Now, see, they told you they were going to do all of these things. They told you that this was going to happen. Now, implied consent. You were aware, if you watch mainstream media or on social media, anywhere you look, they told you that this war was going to happen if Iran didn't do this, this, and this. I mean, heck, this Iran thing has been going on in the news for at least 2 to 3 decades. It's, technically it's kind of been going on since 1979, but who's counting? So that's a long time. They're a boogeyman. So they tell you it's going to happen, and you do nothing. Now, to be fair, you can't do anything. What are you going to do? In your current position, in the state that your person is in, what are you going to do? See, this is where it kind of comes in to the whole free will, alleged, implied consent, and only influence here. They tell you they're going to do it. You have time to fix it. But as part of this looshing process, they installed their own version of the quickening on you. Hey, they didn't tell you to give up your essence and create things for them. They didn't tell you to give it to a machine, did they? No, they just offered you the Doritos or the Lay's potato chips or the burger, and you decided to eat it. You ordered it. You paid for it. You bought in. You didn't have to use money now, did you? No. Insert currency name here, doesn't matter. Imagine the Federal Reserve's downline. So you didn't have to do any of those things, but you did. So now we can install the quickening on you, known as your death. Now, if you die early, that's all your own fault. You didn't have to drink this or eat that or not exercise. We told you all about how exercise is good for you. We put the ingredients right on the box, and you chose to do it anyway. Hey, we didn't tell you to work 80 hours a week to support your family. I mean, you could have just had a tent. I understand it's Siberia and it's cold, certain times of the year, but you can live in a tent. People lived in a tent and a yurt and whatever else for centuries. You could have. You didn't have to actually have a home. You definitely didn't drive a car. You could have walked everywhere. We didn't stop you from walking 7 hours to work every day. You chose this. See, it's realistic, but it's unrealistic, honestly. There is no way for you to get around any of these things in today's world in the way this world is. There's just no way to get around it. So it's not your fault. To say that every death is a suicide, because that's what they say, is not entirely true. And influence has been way more than influence here. Could you, without the quickening that was installed by a machine on your person that then creates death, but also blocks your essence and sources essence from functioning in your body because they own it all because you're a member of all these multi-level marketing schemes, could you, if you didn't have that, do something about the war? Yes. You could have manifested that thing right out of existence. You could have uncreated it with source. You could have blocked it from happening. Now, here's their excuse for this one. Well, we left a pinhole. There's a tiny little pinhole for your little divine spark there, and your tiny little pinhole for your essence that you don't even realize you have. And then a tiny little pinhole in your consciousness. But if you put those pinholes together and you can kind of find it in the needle in the haystack and they keep on moving it around in your person, like nanoseconds, if you could find the pinhole, connect them all together, could you have done it? Yes. You could have changed the fact that we actually have a war in the Middle East right now. But you did nothing. You didn't want to do the work. But come on, man. They made it impossible for you to get there. Again, did they break the rules of war? Well, not quite. But yeah, you might as well say they did. So this has been going on, and then they'll just change the timeline. There's a flood, some guy with an ark, now we've got supposed to have hellfire and brimstone that didn't actually show up. Nothing happened this time. They did not manage to do it. Now it's getting worse. So when the 9 went away, each group of 12 now had the permissions and the quickening passed on to them for the very same reasons. And a little over a week ago, the rules of war changed. Remember, they're no longer the same. Gray is not gray anymore. It's either black or white. Either you did it or you didn't do it. So the next group takes, that was already in position, also made those violations. Boom. Quickening happened and they're gone. The quickening happened for all 9. They're gone. Now we're down to the next group of people who want to be in the positions. We got 12 more people in line right now for each group, and they're ready to rock and roll. They didn't get their permissions, they didn't get their essence, and they didn't get the access to machines they were hoping to get by now. Surely the fire brimstone would have happened, the reset would have happened, all of these things would have happened, and here they are. They should be in charge. In the war, they would have won. Why didn't this all happen? We win every time. This is not your timeline, guys. But they don't understand what's happening. Furthermore, they really don't understand when they started giving orders that went against creation. Boom, dead. Now we're down to the next people in line, and the entire bloodline families around the world all have the quickening. The slate was wiped clean a couple of weeks ago. The choice as to whether they live or die is now up to them, and it isn't the same as it is for us. Meaning we are not really given, or never were given, those opportunities. As your quickening goes away, things change for you on our side of it, because now we have the right to remove things they put in place because the war is officially over. Now, maybe I'm putting out this report for you so you understand everything that's been happening. And part of it, I am, because things are going to start clicking for you. As uncomfortable as the last few weeks have been, things are going to start clicking into place. You will remember how to create with Source again. But remember, listen to the wisdom. You have to listen to the wisdom. We cannot have a bunch of 7-year-old girls running around creating millions of unicorns. No, I'm just kidding. But seriously, listen to the wisdom. He will not allow the co-creation process to happen. If it is not supposed to happen, it won't happen for you. Maybe you'll have it in another way, so be careful what you wish for. And maybe it'll just show up. The blocks and the veils are being lifted from you. It's going to take a little bit of time. I don't think it's going to take a long time, but it's going to take a little bit of time for this process to continue. There still has been a lot of cleanup, because once that happened on the 1st, it was one thing after another. Every day it's been something new coming from Source, telling us which way to go and what to do. Go here and clean this up. There was a lot of stuff in the Middle East they were hoping to get a hold of, or block, I guess. Earth is a being unto herself. Remember, she was part of the original creation too. She was one of those that never turned on us. She was a being, one of the original 12. So, just to kind of clue you in. And they've tried to use her in so many ways. But at the end of the day, we are granted our essence and the breath of life from a divine spark that can only come from Source. Even if somebody else is handing them out, Source still creates them. Your essence is still a co-essence of your own being and of Source. This is where your co-creation process comes in. And for the deep state, welcome to the quickening. All of you. It doesn't matter if you're a president of a country. It doesn't matter if you're a military general. And you know that because you wouldn't have started having your emergency meetings this weekend. Because you know something's wrong. Well, now you know what it is. Welcome to the quickening, friends. As we lose ours, you gain yours. There's no longer in the downline. There's no longer we just influence these people to eat the crazy food and participate in the financial system and all this. That doesn't work anymore. If you're a part of it, you may want to rethink the downline you're in. Are they going to be willing to stop? Probably not. I think these people are going to try to win a war that's already over at all costs. I really, truly think they will. And I'm not talking about the war in Iran. I'm talking about those in the know. They've still continued to do things even today. So, your call. Source is waiting. There will be no trumpets. The trumpets have been canceled. The judgment's already, hey, maybe this is the judgment. I don't know. When I asked Source about it, I'm like, well, what's next after Hellfire and Fury? What are they waiting for now? And he goes, well, the trumpets. And I said, oh, okay. And he goes, well, but I'm thinking, we're not going to have any trumpets this time. And I go, okay. And he goes, why, did you want a trumpet? Maybe I got one laying around here somewhere. He's always, joking around and kind of makes the job a little bit of fun. But no trumpets. Nobody needs a trumpet. We just need to move on from this world that we live in. But in the meantime, things are going to start to get better and better, and it's going to be easier and easier to release things and let them go. I always talk about these songs of the day, and sometimes Source, when it's urgent that we come talk, and he'll give me a song of the day. So I'll share with you today's song of the day, because there have been many over the last few days, but this one's kind of a neat song, and even if it's not your type of music, you might like the lyrics. The song's called Hanging by a Moment, and I think it's by Lifehouse, if I remember correctly. And it talks about letting go of things I know, and I'm hanging on by a moment with you. So maybe, just maybe, we hang on for a moment with Source. And remember, hey, everything in his time, everything exactly the way it's supposed to be, when it's supposed to be, and not a minute faster. And I know no one wants to be done with this part of the job more than me. I know all of you are very anxious and are awaiting big changes in the world, and they are going to happen because he said it's going to happen. It would have been lovely even for me for it to happen 3 years ago or 5 years ago, but then at the same time, if it did, I wouldn't know all the things that I know now. And I don't think we wouldn't be as prepared as we are now to move the world forward together. As Sonny always says in the news, if it's going to be, it's up to me, it's up to all of us. And I don't know if we would have been ready. I can't speak for someone else, but there's a lot we've learned about how we got here. And even the things in tonight's report are all a part of how we got here. Just because we don't have those 9, who's to say that some other people aren't going to try to become the moguls of the widget industry and take over the world? Let's think about it. What do we need to do to prepare for what is coming for us? Because our gifts are coming back. So use the gifts wisely. On that note, that's been the GIA report for the 6th of April, 2026, and I will see you again next week.